of freedom of speech in this country. And if you thought the migrant hotel regime was a scandal, it turns out that twice as many migrants are living in private accommodation in your local communities, not the communities where the politicians or the establishment media live. And finally,
I am leading a political party that I think is going to win the next general election in the United Kingdom.
We revealed tonight on Farage some bombshell new data that has torn apart the two-party system in Westminster in what could be the best news for Britain. All of that to come, but first, here's your news headlines, and it's Sam Francis.
Martin, thank you, and good evening to you. Just after 7 o'clock, well, an asylum seeker housed at the Bell Hotel in Epping has today been found guilty on all 5 charges against him, including the sexual assault of a 14-year-old girl. The court heard Hadushka Batu also harassed 2 other teenagers and an adult woman. The 38-year-old denied the allegations and called them fabrications, but the judge said the evidence was clear and consistent. Kabatu will be sentenced on the 23rd of September, with the court warning an immediate prison term is likely. His arrest earlier this summer triggered protests and counter-demonstrations that tonight continue outside the hotel. We'll have plenty more with our national reporter, Charlie Peters. In other news, Sir Keir Starmer is refusing to say whether he would sack his deputy, Angela Rayner, if she is found to have broken the ministerial code over tax on her new flat. The Prime Minister says he will, of course, act on the findings of his independent standards advisor after Rayner admitted she underpaid stamp duty. Rayner insists it was a mistake linked to what she described as complex legal advice involving a trust for her son with special educational needs. Tory leader Kemi Badenoch, though, is demanding Sir Keir sack her. The Chancellor Rachel Reeves, however, says she has full confidence in Angela Rayner.
I have full confidence in Angela Rayner. She's a good friend and a colleague. She has accepted the right stamp duty wasn't paid. That was an error. That was a mistake. She is working hard now to rectify that.
17 people have been injured in London after a double-decker bus crashed near Victoria Station. The Route 24 service veered onto the pavement just before 8:30 this morning, yards from one of Britain's busiest rail hubs. 15 people, including the driver, were taken to hospital. Police say none of the injuries are life-threatening. Eyewitnesses described a massive bang and people screaming as the bus came off the road at speed. Police are now appealing for dashcam and mobile phone footage as their investigation continues. A former Royal Marine has denied deliberately driving into crowds of Liverpool fans celebrating the club's Premier League victory parade. 53-year-old Paul Doyle faces 31 charges, including grievous bodily harm with intent, after more than 130 people were injured in May. One of the victims was just a baby, another 77 years old. Appearing via video link from prison, Doyle wiped away tears as his defence accused Belmarsh of blocking access to evidence. His trial is set for November, and prosecutors allege he used his car as a weapon. Meanwhile, Lisbon's mayor has called yesterday's disaster on the funicular railway one of the biggest tragedies in the city's recent history. 16 people were killed and more than 20 injured, including tourists from Germany and Spain, when the packed carriage came off the tracks. A 3-year-old child was among the wounded. One local guide described rushing to the scene, saying, "When I got to the crushed funicular, all I could hear was silence." Portugal's Transport Office says initial findings into the cause will be released tomorrow. And legendary fashion designer Giorgio Armani has died at the age of 91. The Italian style icon built a global empire that redefined modern elegance, blending sharp tailoring with business acumen to grow a company worth billions. Armani's name became synonymous with understated luxury, dressing Hollywood stars and power players alike. His death was confirmed today by Armani Group, which said the industry has lost one of its most visionary figures. That's the news on GB News. Do stay with us for plenty more right here with Martin.
Thank you, Sam. Let's get straight now to our national reporter, Charlie Peters, live from Epping. Charlie, over to you. A huge day and a huge protest behind you.
Well, as you see, I apologise for that language there, Martin, but as you see, significant gathering here. People marching towards Epping. The sign behind me really says it all in terms of the message that people are just putting out here, saying they're not far right, they're just right. And these protests and this demonstration, this walk towards Epping Council building from the Bell Hotel has been organised, as it has been so often in the last few months, every Thursday, but now especially after those 5 guilty verdicts were delivered in Chelmsford Magistrates Court just moments ago, with a 14-year-old girl and an adult woman being confirmed that they had been sexually assaulted by an Ethiopian migrant, small boat migrant asylum seeker called Kabetu. Now, Hadush Kabetu, an Ethiopian. Now, the people marching here have recently now, since the start of July, when people first started being kept in the Bell Hotel and they started having those concerns nearby. The Bell Hotel has been used for a long time, of course, but the concerns about men assaulting young girls in the area sparked in July. And at Chelmsford Magistrates Court earlier today, we did hear the judge, Christopher Williams, confirm that within just a few days of his arrival, Kabetu had assaulted that 14-year-old girl and had engaged in conversations with those children, describing them as pretty and saying he wanted to have babies with them, inviting them back to the Bell Hotel. And it was at the court today that Kabetu's defence was described as inconsistent, and that the prosecution's case and the case of all those witnesses and the victims was found to be believable and credible as the district judge delivered those guilty verdicts. But here in Epping, marching to the council, as they have done consistently now for several weeks, dozens of protests in this area to put forward their message. They want the Bell Hotel closed, and they want to move from the local area, and they want it done because they do not think that the children, the women and girls are safe. And they'll be very much vindicated. That's the sense I've got speaking to people here, Martin, vindicated by those guilty verdicts, that they weren't spreading fear, they weren't hate-mongering or stirring up hatred. In fact, they were reacting to legitimate and real concerns raised on the ground based on what people in this area had experienced. So there's going to be consistent protests continuing here, I imagine, Martin. But this evening, Essex Police said that they think that no reaction to this verdict shouldn't be any sort of disorder. When I've raised that with local people here, they said that they're not intending to deliver any unrest. They're just going to continuously and constantly, peacefully raise their concerns about that hotel. And you can see we're right at the back of this crowd now, but behind me, if you can see, the flags as people march on towards those council buildings.
And Charlie Peters, it's vital to point out that, of course, today was the guilty verdict, but we do not know the sentencing yet. That will be passed down later on in the final week of September. All eyes will be on the length of that sentence, Charlie Peters, because if it's less than the 12 months barrier, then that, of course, would mean this individual could not be deported. And I think the notion that these protests are going to go away, not only in Epping, but also nationwide, Charlie Peters, hinges ostensibly upon that verdict. People will expect to see this individual deported. They'll expect to see justice not only seen to be done, but actually being done, because some of the evidence that came out of this case, Charlie, was enough to bring you to tears. A 14-year-old girl sat on a park bench, was approached by Kabetu, and she offered him some pizza, an act of friendship, a beautiful act of friendship was responded by him trying to molest her and inviting her back to that hotel where those protests are. Charlie Peters, it encapsulates so much that people have been saying. We don't know who's in these hotels, we don't know what's happening in the hotels, and when the crimes are committed, people demand now, Charlie Peters, justice must be handed out.
Yes, Martin, the 23rd of September, back at Chelmsford Magistrates Court is where that sentence will be handed down. And the District Judge, Christopher Williams, was clear towards Hadush Kabetu before he was taken down to the cells by the 2 security guards in the dock of Court 1. He told him, you can only expect a custodial sentence, and an immediate one at that. The question is only of how long it will be. That's what the judge said to Kobaitu before he was taken away. And Kobaitu reacted with no emotion whatsoever as he was told that, and indeed as he was told that he was guilty on all 5 counts that he was charged with earlier this summer. Now, we have to wait until the 23rd of September to find out what that verdict will be. But speaking to locals here in Epping tonight as they continue their protests, they will be watching very carefully as to what that sentence is, after they feel a sense of vindication but also of concern and emotive support, as you would expect, towards the victims involved in this case, but also to the whole community that's had to put up with being the centre of so much attention and concern from around the country for so long. This town does not want to be the centre of a national story, Martin. That's what people here keep saying. They want to go back to their ordinary lives. And for ordinary lives to return in Epping, in Essex, that means the Bell Hotel needs to close. And for them, all small boat migrants who arrived in Britain illegally should be removed from this area. They say it's not safe. They can now say they've proven it's not safe. Something very urgently has to change.
Charlie Peter, I'm so proud of GBNews' coverage of all these protests, because you've been giving the people there a voice. You've been treating them with humanity. You've been giving them a platform and allowing them to voice their very, very real concerns. Meanwhile, Charlie Peters, as you recall, when I spoke to you earlier on in my show, I became very distressed about the fact that even today, The Guardian are calling these people behind you far right for protesting about the fact a sexual assaulter lives in a hotel that they pay for with their taxes, who came in illegally within days, was assaulting, molesting their children. Charlie Peters, these people aren't far right, they're just right.
Yes, and Martin, earlier in the week you've also been discussing coverage put out by various politicians and public figures expressing concern about a link being drawn between sexual offences and immigration. Now, obviously, it's a very delicate and difficult area of politics in which victims and survivors have to be at the forefront of that conversation. But I think a lot of people reacting to that attack on those people drawing that link have been a bit concerned that actually victims and survivors have been taken away from that conversation. But here in Epping, amid this protest, people are trying to make sure that their voices are heard and that the concerns of local people about the arrival of undocumented migrants to the area is also at the forefront of the political conversation.
Charlie Peters in Epping, you're doing once again God's work. Thank you, my colleague. Thank you, my friend. Keep on going. Keep on giving those people there a voice. Charlie Peters signing off. Thank you very, very much. Now, are you sitting down? We've got some significant breaking news for you now. You might want to pick up a gin and tonic. Nadine Dorries has sensationally defected to Nigel Farage's Reform UK party and declared, quotes, "The Tory party is dead." After months of secret negotiations, the former Conservative Culture Secretary is joining forces with the Reform leader as he plots a path to Downing Street. Just to repeat that, ahead on the eve of Reform UK's conference in Birmingham, which of course kicks off tomorrow. The breaking news is this: Nadine Dorries has sensationally defected to Nigel Farage's Reform UK party and declared the Tory party is dead. Now we learn of months of secret negotiations, and the former Conservative Culture Secretary is now joining forces with Reform and Nigel Farage as he plots a path to Downing Street. Will Nadine Dorries make a surprise appearance at Birmingham tomorrow? We can only anticipate that probably might happen. Nadine Dorries, a big scalp, a Conservative grandee of yore, joining forces with Nigel Farage. Wow, that is quite the story. We'll have more reaction on that throughout the rest of the show. Now, Angela Rayner's career is hanging by a thread amidst the news, the breaking news in this past hour, that her lawyers have denied giving her tax and trust advice. The storm clouds are gathering for Angela Rayner. That's next.
want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage with me, your host, Martin Dorries. And it's already been a sensational day in politics, and it's just got juicier. Got some breaking news for you now. Nadine Dorries has sensationally defected to Nigel Farage's Reform UK party and declared the Tory party is dead. After months of secret negotiations, the former Conservative Culture Secretary is now joining forces with the Reform leader as he plots his path to Downing Street. Well, I'm delighted to say I'm joined in the studio in Westminster by the editor of the Sunday Telegraph, Alistair Heath. Alistair, a pleasure to have your company. As ever, you've walked right into this breaking news scoop. Let's get your immediate visceral reaction. Nigel Farage is saying this is his biggest coup yet, describing Nadine Dorries, as you'd expect, as a hugely successful politician, author and columnist, and she's expected to open the Reform Conference tomorrow in Birmingham.
Yes, I mean, I think it's a very interesting development, and obviously Farage is very excited about that. I think it points to a very interesting idea here, which is she's very close to Boris Johnson, as was Jake Berry, who recently also defected from the Conservative Party to Reform. I don't think she would be joining Reform now if she thought there was a hope that Boris Johnson would return to frontline politics and try and rescue the Conservative Party that way. And so if he's not going to do that, she's basically saying the Conservative Party is finished, the future of the right is Reform, and therefore, hence why she's going to be, paraded tomorrow at the Reform Conference. Reform Conference tomorrow is going to be very interesting. It's the first time I am going to be attending, as a journalist, a Reform Conference, for example. The centre of gravity is shifted. They are effectively, they're leading the polls easily now, and they're being treated even by the government as the official opposition. So this is quite interesting.
The passing phrase, the Tory party is dead, will come as a cruel blow to Kemi Badenoch,
yes,
who's simply been superseded by events. There's a feeling that, particularly during July, during the so-called off-season, Farage and Reform UK simply went into full-on campaign mode. The Tory party has just been left in the dust.
Yes, I mean, look, I feel very sorry for Kemi Badenoch. I think she's actually working hard. I actually think she's good. The problem is people aren't listening. They don't want to listen. It's a bit like when William Hague was fighting Tony Blair in the 1990s. There's this huge tidal wave of change, and unfortunately people are just not interested in the Conservatives. In fact, they think that Labour and the Conservatives are the same. So whenever they get angry at Labour, they also automatically get angry at the Conservatives. So, it's this kind of very weird, unusual situation in politics. And I think, yes, the tide is turning at the moment against the Conservative Party, that's quite clear.
What would you see as Nadine Dorries' role? One extra piece of information here. Nigel Farage has offered no guarantee of a ministerial role, but Ms Dorries has not ruled out return to Parliament under Reform's banner. A dramatic return, at least to the backbenchers.
Yes, I mean, it's very interesting also. I think her role partly is going to be to appeal to remaining Conservative voters. I think Reform have grabbed some Labour voters. I think they probably grabbed almost as many Labour voters as they would get. I think the next batch of defections away from Labour, and I think there'll be many more, will probably be people going to the far left, going to the Greens, going to the New Corbynite Party and so on. But the Conservative Party is still at 16, 17, 18% in the polls, that kind of thing. So if Reform want to grow further, they're at about 30% or maybe a bit more. Yeah. They need to grab more Conservative Party votes. So I think their aim really is for people like Nadine Dorries to appeal to the remaining Conservative Party base, who tend to be much older voters, and to say, look, it's safe for you to join Reform. You know, there's lots of former Conservatives who now believe that that is their new home.
And I wonder if it's not just voters that Mr Farage is hoping Ms Dorries will appeal to, because he's saying here, he's always been ruling out any pacts, any allegiances with the party, but might Nadine Dorries' defection also encourage other Conservative MPs, sitting or past, to follow ship?
Yes, clearly, right? So Farage has to be careful. He can't have too many Conservatives joining Reform, or else people are going to start thinking there's no difference between the two parties. He needs to be very careful that the people who do join actually agree with Reform's values on issues like the ECHR and other issues. But I think getting more Tories to join is a good thing for him, because, as I say, he needs to push down, he needs to squeeze the Conservative Party further if he wants to increase his share of the vote, because I don't think there's that many more votes to be had from Labour. So I think she's just the biggest one so far, the biggest domino to fall, but I suspect there will be more dominoes to come. And to be honest, as the months progress, as the years progress, you'll see more and more Conservatives joining Reform if the polls continue to play out the way they are, if Reform continues to look like it's very likely to win the next election.
Alistair Heath, now let's return to what was the biggest political story of the day, and perhaps still is. Angela Rayner, her career seems to be hanging by a thread. Kudos to the Telegraph for breaking this story, for doing that investigation, and the sensational newsline coming out this evening. Of course, Ms Rayner always said, I was given bad advice. Yes. Well, the latest line is her lawyers, and that is Verico and Associates, have come out this evening saying we never gave tax advice to Angela Rayner, and we are being made scapegoats.
Yes, this is very strong stuff from this conveyancing firm. They are basically saying it's not their job to give tax advice. They did not give tax advice. They did what they were meant to do, so don't blame them. And they feel that they're being scapegoated. Now, that's a very aggressive response from them. Obviously, they want to set the record straight. So Rayner now needs to show where the advice came from that she claims she got, because if she can't point us towards this advice, then was she really telling the truth? I think her career is on the line. To be honest, I think she's finished. I think she will go. I think her position is completely untenable. It could be tonight, it could be tomorrow, but I think the situation is very, very grave for her.
So the chair of the so-called ethics committee, Sir Laurie Magnus, it's with him now. It's in his in tray. We're expecting something potentially tomorrow.
Yes, the whole thing's a very legalistic situation, right? And I don't think it should be a legalistic situation. The bottom line is she's messed up. She should have paid more tax than she did. She's Deputy Prime Minister. She's serving in a government that's obsessed with increasing taxes, including tax on property. She has attacked people in the past for not paying enough taxes. She's never given the Conservatives or Reform or anybody else the benefit of the doubt, right? It's always been very, very aggressive. There's just been too much hypocrisy, too many double standards. It can't go on. She needs to go. Will she go? I think she probably will.
And if she goes, do you think she'll go as the deputy? Will she try and offer a token resignation as housing minister?
I don't think she can. I think she'd have to go from everything. Now, obviously, that'd be whatever happens, it's a disaster for the Prime Minister, right? Because, he will have a new enemy on the backbenches if she does go. And if she doesn't go, his government is very, very fatally damaged. Once again, sleaze, scandal, double standards, all that sort of stuff. Don't forget, Starmer, when he was elected, was obsessed with propriety, with, behaviour. He claimed that he was very different to the Conservative Party. The grown-ups are in charge. Well, the grown-ups are sleazy and they don't know what the right tax they have to pay is, and they don't seem to understand property law, even if they are the minister in charge of property. So that's a really big problem.
The term began with free gear Keir.
Yes.
With the giveaway.
Yeah, that was a disaster.
The designer clothes.
All these things are connected.
Yeah, and today we learned that Angela Rayner was giving over £1,000 worth of Pride tickets in Brighton. So the freebie gate continues. Do you think this is symptomatic, Alistair Heath, of a broader moral decay? Not only within politics, but across all of Britain. They promised a change of God. They promised a change of morality. It's not only been the same, it's been worse.
Yeah, well, we clearly have a decadent elite, right? I mean, they are just not behaving correctly. This is not the way you'd expect the government to behave. And it's certainly not the way you'd expect people who claim to be holier than thou to behave. It's very sad, to be honest with you, and I think it mirrors declining standards in many other areas in our society. I think the public is very angry about that, and I think that is a reason why they are turning to new parties, be it on the right, such as Reform, or on the left, the Greens, the new Corbynite Party, even the Liberal Democrats are progressing. There's a demand, a desire, a profound desire for change. And, you know, Labour was the only vehicle for change at the last election because people still wanted to give the system one last try. Not that many people voted for them, but enough to give them a landslide given what happened to the Conservative Party. But that was it now. And people are very angry and they're turning to new parties. And that is why, you know, you see all this change that might be about to take place.
Do you think all of this will be enough to finally break the shackles of the two-party system, the first-past-the-post system?
Well, no, I don't think first-past-the-post is going to change, but I think the two-party system is gone for now. You've seen the two-party system crumble in many European countries, regardless of what voting system they have. France has got a very, very tough version of first-past-the-post, actually. And still you've got multiple new parties there. The only place where it survived is America, and that's only because the Trumpites have effectively taken over the Republican Party, and now the far left is taking over the Democrat Party. So even there you've had a change, even if the names of the parties haven't changed. All over the Western world there's a demand for change. And scandals like the Rayner scandal are just precipitating even greater demands.
Alistair Heath, a final thought for the Conservative Party. Clearly, the messaging from Kemi Badenoch doesn't seem to be shifting the dial. In fact, it seems to be going backwards. Might there be a route back, for example, with somebody like Robert Jenrick in charge? Or is the problem at the moment, particularly around illegal immigration, the Labour Party can't fix it and perhaps the Conservative Party caused it?
Yeah, my basic view is that there's not very much they can do to shift the dial, and it doesn't really matter who's in charge. It's going to be very, very difficult to shift the dial. The public's not interested. That whenever anything goes wrong, the public thinks that the Tories are equally to blame. The more Labour falls, the more the Tories fall. It's a vicious circle for the Conservative Party. The situation is disastrous at the moment for Labour, but it's catastrophic for the Conservatives.
Fascinating stuff, and thank you so much for joining us in the studio. It's the editor of the Sunday Telegraph, Alistair Heath. Your column today was brilliant. We didn't get a chance to get around to that, but thank you so much for joining us in the studio. It's much, much appreciated. Thank you. Now, in a moment's time, if you thought the migrant hotel regime was a scandal, wait until you hear about how many migrants are living in rent-free accommodation on a street near you. Not near the politicians, on a street near you. That's next.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GBNews Travel Destinations Forecast.
Parts of France will experience heavy, possibly thundery showers over the coming days, but elsewhere across northern parts of Europe, it should remain mostly fine and settled. That's certainly the case across much of Portugal and Spain, though northern parts of Spain may start to catch some of these showers pushing their way into France. As I say, some of these could turn into quite heavy downpours with a risk of hail and thunder. Elsewhere across Europe, though, mostly fine, settled, bar the odd shower across parts of Greece, and the settled weather remains over the weekend with temperatures in the mid-20s to low 30s.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GBNews Travel Destinations Forecast.
Good evening. Some very heavy rain in places today, but it's all shifting away now, and tomorrow looks an awful lot calmer. The winds will be lighter. Most of us will have a dry day. We haven't seen many of those for this week. Low pressure is definitely in control, sitting to the north of the UK. We've had this low actually drifting right across England and Wales. That's been providing the heavy downpours, starting to ease through this evening, pulling out into the North Sea. Now, it won't be a completely dry night. There'll be a few showers coming into Western Scotland, Northern Ireland, the odd one still for northwest England and West Wales. But most places will be dry with long clear spells overnight. We'll allow it to turn a bit colder, certainly than last night. Temperatures in rural spots down into single digits. A fresh but fine start then to Friday, and overall a pretty good looking day. Certainly, as I said, a lot drier than many days have been through this week. Still not completely dry, still a few showers perhaps across the far north of Scotland and the north and the west of Northern Ireland. A few showers feeding in from the Irish Sea into northwest England possibly too. But I think for most of England and Wales it'll be a dry, fine start to the day. As I said, a little bit cooler than it was first thing this morning. During the day we'll see some clouds developing, so it'll be a day of cloudy spells and a little little bit of sunshine coming through. A few showers are still possible in western areas, but they should be light, and most places won't see them stay dry. It will turn a bit cloudy over the Western Isles with some drizzly rain possible here as the breeze picks up. But for most, the winds are a lot lighter than they have been, so feeling a bit warmer than today. Temperatures high teens, low 20s. Warmer still on Saturday, and again, most places dry and bright. Still a possibility of a few showers in western Scotland. Quite a bit of cloud around on Saturday, so the sunshine will be fairly hazy, but I think you'll notice that difference, the humidity starting to pick up, and a warmer day with temperatures more widely over 20 degrees Celsius. Make the most of it though, because Sunday things turn wet and windy once more.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Dubes & Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk then?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact is Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Martin Dorries, on an action-packed, astonishing day in politics. Now, you remember back during when Rachel Reeves said this?
I can confirm today that, led by the work of my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, we will be ending the costly use of hotels to house asylum seekers in this Parliament.
And do you recall when Yvette Cooper said this just 2 days ago?
We need to close all asylum hotels, and we need to do so for good.
But what they didn't tell you was the obvious thing, that closing migrant hotels simply means putting migrants in houses of multiple occupancy. In other words, in flats and houses on your streets, not on Rachel Reeves' streets, not on Yvette Cooper's streets, not on the BBC streets, on your streets. And yes, it has emerged today that nearly twice as many migrants are living rent-free, paid for by you, than in homes than in hotels. A total of 38,000 people were staying in hotels by the end of December, but a whopping 66,000 are being kept in so-called dispersal accommodation, which mainly consists of privately rented homes shared by people all at once. And guess what? The whole thing has been bankrolled by the government, and therefore you are paying for the entirety of this. I'm joined now by a Manchester landlady, Cyan Astley. Cyan, welcome to the show. I understand that you have kept your principles above profit. You haven't taken the Serco bag of silver. But of course, private landlords are being tempted with huge sums of money and lengthy contracts to try and make sure that all the housing is hoovered up by the government for asylum seekers.
I mean, that's correct. And I haven't taken any of these contracts, I haven't signed up for these contracts, and on principle won't. But of course, a lot of landlords are. If you have a standard 3-bed house which could house 5 economic migrants and split them into 5, and you get 25 grand a year for that from the government, and you'd only get £18,000 from a family of 3 renting it out, of course a lot of landlords are going to go for that because it makes financial sense. But it's just wrong on so many levels. A lot of the housing stock is being hoovered up. And
You know, Cyan, when we go around the country at GB News, we bump into people all the time. We bump into tenants, we bump into landlords, and we hear so many stories of houses of multiple occupancy on streets where people never had a say. They fall into disrepair. We had an astonishing story in Sunderland where one was turned into a cannabis factory and it burnt the entire street down. So there's a feeling that they're being kitted out to the max by the government. They're being handed out willy-nilly. Nobody ever has a say. And in the meantime, the housing stock is simply disappearing for actual British tenants to take up in them.
It's a real problem with HMOs. And I live in quite a studenty area in Manchester. And when you have a preponderance of HMOs, it changes the balance of the whole area. It tips the balance, the feel of a whole area. And there's a lot of areas, especially in cities, where they already have a lot of HMOs. A lot of students have moved now into nicer accommodation, purpose-built, and the government are now using these HMOs for exactly the type of accommodation that you're talking about. And it's not very good for an area. They're not balanced, they're not mixed, they're not the sort of areas that people want to live in. And that's not good. If you change the very nature of an area, and if you introduce crime and uncertainty and fear, how can that be good for communities? How can that be good for towns and cities across the country? And as you say, they're not living in those streets and they're not living in those towns and in those areas, are they? So it just doesn't affect them.
Simon, may I commend you on putting your principles before profit. Now, thank you. It means a lot. But a lot of landlords, of course, will be tempted by big rental hikes and lengthy contracts and no maintenance fees. The government's simply pricing people out of the market.
They are pricing them out of the market. And the other thing that you have to consider is that the private rented sector has had an onslaught of legislation and taxation changes over the past few years. So a lot of landlords are already feeling that squeeze. Now, I know people say, get the little violin out for landlords, but at the end of the day, it's a business. So if you are suffering from excessive legislation, which I think there is, and if you are also punitively taxed, then you're going to be scrabbling around to get those extra pennies in. And so they are going to be tempted by these kind of contracts. And I think the government know this. I mean, I do not understand why they are trying to dismantle the PRS, because we need good landlords. We need rented accommodation. Not everybody wants to buy a house. Some people are quite transient. Young people, I rent to young professionals, and they don't necessarily want to buy at that particular time. Somebody might move into the area, etc. So you need a good private rented sector. And I cannot understand for the life of me, unless it's an actual plan, to drive small landlords out, and there are increasingly landlords that think that's the case. I can't understand for the life of me why we keep attacking the private rented sector.
Well, Simon Astley, I wonder actually if you've answered your own question. A lot of people I speak to believe that the government almost is waging a war on landlords because it wants landlords to bail out. It wants to hoover up the housing stock for its own ends. Perhaps in the same way, it wants to hoover up farming land for solar farms, for housing estates. Simon Astley, once again, I commend you on your beautiful moral stance, and thank you for joining us tonight on Farage. It's an absolute pleasure to have your company. Thank you very, very much. And let's continue the conversation back in the studio. I'm joined by the immigration lawyer, Fadi Farhat. Fadi, always a pleasure to have your company. What's your take on the situation with the government simply forcing many landlords to take Serco's bag of silver?
Yeah, it's a concerning situation, but the reason why the government's allowed to do that is because it puts the offer on the table, and sometimes the offers are just irresistible. Yeah. And if you're a private landlord, if you're facing issues with a volatile market, and there's virtually hardly any taxation incentives you're being offered a package across several years. You're being offered a management package as well in many cases, where they will manage the property,
arm's length,
do the repairs. Yeah. And if you're a landlord, it's sometimes just easy to accept. Yeah. Not only that, if you're a private landlord and you have issues with tenants, there's, currently in terms of, from my perspective in the legal profession, even to get the relevant possession order and the processes, that can take months. There's a backlog in the county court. So if you're a landlord facing all this, facing a major headache, it's easy to accept.
Fadi, I want to get your take, if I could, on the situation today in Epping. Hadush Kabatu found guilty of sexually assaulting a 14-year-old and an adult woman. All eyes now on the sentence. And a key point, 12 months, the threshold for deportation. But you've been saying something fascinating to me. We could deport these people anyway, irrespective of the sentence. Why don't we?
Well, yes, there's now, we're waiting for the sentence. Sometimes the issue is this to me. Sometimes when we're having this debate on immigration, it's easy for the right to say, oh, the 1951 Refugee Convention, let's scrap it. And then it's easy for the left to then reply back, oh, that's a breach of international law. And then the detail gets lost. Yes. In between two opposite sides, the detail gets lost. In terms of the convention, Article 33.2 of the 1951 Refugee Convention says you can be excluded from refugee status if you've been convicted by final judgment of a particularly serious crime and you're a danger to the community.
And that doesn't necessarily mean it has to breach the 12-month threshold.
No, it doesn't contain any provision as to what is meant by a particularly serious crime and a danger to the community. If you take those words, sexual assault of a 14-year-old meets that definition.
All day long.
For years, we have defined particularly serious crime as being convicted of a custodial sentence for not just 1 year, it was 2 years. I think it was Priti Patel as Home Secretary that changed it to 12 months, 1 year. Technically, it's not in the convention, so we have perhaps made or defined it in a way that's a bit more generous than the convention. And that you see in other areas. For example, in terms of housing, for example, again, the Refugee Convention in itself is silent about housing on asylum seekers.
Right.
Not refugees. So once you get refugee status, Article 21 of the convention contains housing duties. But even those, it's mentioned that it should be as favourable as the local population, not more favourable than the local population.
So what you're saying...
not in relation to asylum seekers. So where we get the asylum seekers, that's in our own domestic law, where we've implemented Section 95 of the 1999 Act.
So before we get too bogged down in legalese, what you're saying in essence is there is no legal obligation to house all asylum seekers immediately.
Not
it's
explicitly.
Actually a choice. In the same way that we could deport people for these crimes without breaching that 12 months, that's also a choice. So that sounds to me like Britain's a soft touch.
There's no explicit right. So obviously when asylum seekers make their applications, you have to have humane reception arrangements, which may include housing, etc. But there's no explicit right. But then there's this disconnect between what the Refugee Convention says and how we've implemented it as a political choice. So these things can be revised, and I think they should be part of the wider debate. And you saw that earlier this week, because earlier this week, Yvette Cooper stopped the family reunion scheme. That is for family members of refugees to come to the UK. Again, technically and strictly speaking, the Refugee Convention doesn't contain provisions about family reunion.
And
we've implemented that into our law.
And in fact, we hear all the time from the Liberal left, Britain is becoming a fascist state with the least welcoming place on the planet. In actual fact, European Union nations are far more harsh in terms of deportation, far more lenient in terms of dishing out asylum seeker housing. Again, I put it to you, Fadi, we're a soft touch.
Well, let's just take on that point about family reunion. Socialist Denmark, or the Scandinavian countries which we hold as a bastion of socialism. Denmark allows family reunion provisions after you've been granted refugee status after 2 years. Strictly speaking, before Yvette Cooper suspended the family reunion scheme, you could be granted refugee status and the next day you could apply for family members. So countries do implement the convention in different ways, and that's
a choice. And we've made a choice to be more refugees welcome, more open-armed, more forgiving, and more lenient than even so-called liberal nations like Denmark.
Which is a good thing or a bad thing, depending on which side of the political spectrum you're on. Yes, but that's a correct assessment.
Politics is all about choices, and I just say again, it seems, from your evidence, which is very compelling and believable, we're making soft choices. Fadi, superb, very insightful. Thank you very much. Fadi Hart, immigration lawyer, absolute pleasure. Now, coming up in just a moment's time, we're revealing some shock new polling that tears the two-party system apart. This is huge. You will not want to miss it on the eve of the Reform Convention. That's next.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain. So he can say whatever he wants. A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country. There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor. Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Dorries, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk
No,
now?
that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m.
only on GB News.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There, you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
It's been a huge day in politics, and welcome back to Farage with me, Martin Dorries. Now, earlier on in the show, we discussed Nigel Farage's astonishing testimony to US Congressional Committee last night. Here's something else that he had to say later in the day.
Now, apart from being a GB News presenter, which I'm very proud of, I've got a sideline as well. I am leading a political party that I think is going to win the next general election in the United Kingdom.
That was perhaps the boldest we've heard Nigel Farage speaking about reform's electoral chances at the next general election, and it comes on the same day that a new poll for JL Partners has put Reform UK a shocking 10-point lead ahead of the Labour Party. Well, I'm joined now by Guy Miscampbell, the director at JL Partners, who produced this poll. Guy, welcome to the show. So the figures are startling, the gap is growing, and I'm interested in getting your take on why do you think that the Reform Party is simply leaving the rest now in the dust?
Thanks very much for having me. I think the main reason, honestly, is Nigel Farage is a man whose time has come. He's been saying the same things for a long time. He's had the same diagnosis as to what's happening in this country. And for a long time, those views weren't in vogue. But now the country is wanting to see leadership. They're wanting to see action, especially on immigration. And immigration is no longer just an issue which is about how many people we let in, but it's also an issue about fairness, about safety, and about what public services people get and what the cost of living is. And all of those issues are things that British people have been praying for action for all the way back to David Cameron in the tens of thousands. And they're sick of promises being made and promises being broken. And Nigel Farage seems like the only person who might fix that.
And do you think, Guy, there's something else going on, and that is particularly around the sense of the small boats crisis and even front door legal immigration? The Labour Party can't fix it, and the Tory party, they cause this disaster. And so not only do they see a fresh movement perhaps as a way forward, but the establishment parties, both of them, a plague on both their houses.
Exactly. I think in the last election, people were willing to press the emergency button and elect a Labour government. They were willing to do that because the Conservative Party had lost control and they just wanted them out. Now it seems that the British public has decided that the Labour Party are just as bad as the Conservatives were. They don't have a grip on immigration, they don't have a grip on the cost of living crisis, and so they're willing to press the emergency button again. They've given up on the old system, and Nigel Farage is leading a party which is saying Britain needs reform, and it's hard to argue with that diagnosis.
Astonishing stuff, and this comes, of course, on the eve of the Conference for Reform UK in Birmingham. Thanks for joining us on the show tonight. Guy Campbell, the director at Jail Partners, who produced that poll. Just to quickly go over the figures, Reform on 32%, Labour on 22%, Conservatives on 18%, a 10-point lead for Reform UK, their biggest lead thus far. Next is State of the Nation. Matt Goodwin, you are, of course, the host of that. What's on your menu?
Well, we're going to be looking at this bombshell defection to reform in a bit more detail. What's it going to mean for Nigel Farage and his party? Now, somebody else who's been making a bit of noise this week is Robert Jenrick, trying to outflank Farage on the issue of immigration. Is that going to work? We're going to be debating that, as well as this growing free speech crisis in our country, as symbolised by the Graham Linehan controversy. So we're going to be getting into the weeds on all of that. We've got some great guests. We've got a great panel starting in a few minutes. I'll see everybody on State of the Nation.
We've actually got a couple of minutes left. I want to get your thoughts on that defection.
Yeah.
And we learn now that Nadine Dorries might even be the opening act in Birmingham tomorrow. Do you think this is not only, she said the Tory party is dead, a damning indictment on her way out? What's her appeal? Will she be a minister? Will she be a parliamentarian? I think she hopes that's the case. Or is it something more than that? Is it to try and bring Tory voters into the fold, or maybe even cause more defections from the Conservative Party?
I think there are a few things going on here. I think, firstly, Nigel Farage has realised he needs that broad tent to try and appeal to the country, and he needs to take as many of those Conservatives with him as he can. And there's still quite a bit of that Conservative vote that Nigel Farage can really squeeze down, about 15, 16%. But there are some risks here, just two, just to put out there. One is Nadine Dorries was a big supporter of the online safety bill. Now, Nigel Farage has committed in recent days to overturn that.
Yeah.
So what is the current understanding around that bill? And the second is Nadine Dorries was a big supporter of Boris Johnson.
Right.
Now, of course, there are many people in the Reform Party who feel that Boris Johnson made a number of catastrophic errors when it comes to immigration. So does she approve of Boris Johnson's record on that issue, or is she willing to reject it? Those are things that I think are going to be coming out in the next 48, 72 hours.
And do you think, very quick 10 seconds, is this the death of Johnsonism?
Well, I don't personally see any way back for Boris Johnson. I think his brand is not what it was. But Nigel Farage, you can see, is clearly putting pieces in place that would make that even more difficult.
Excellent stuff, and a tantalising tease of what's to come ahead of State of the Nation with Matt Goodwin. I'll be back tomorrow, 3 till 6 p.m. Of course, tomorrow is all about the Birmingham Conference for Reform UK. We'll be covering that live on my show. Please do join us there. But next, State of the Nation with Matt Goodwin.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Box Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Good evening. Some very heavy rain in places today, but it's all shifting away now, and tomorrow looks an awful lot calmer. The winds will be lighter. Most of us will have a dry day. We haven't seen many of those for this week. Low pressure is definitely in control, sitting to the north of the UK. We've had this low actually drifting right across England and Wales. That's been providing the heavy downpours, starting to ease through this evening, pulling out into the North Sea. Now, it won't be a completely dry night. There'll be a few showers coming into Western Scotland, Northern Ireland, the odd one still for North West England and West Wales. But most places will be dry with long clear spells overnight. We'll allow it to turn a bit colder, certainly than last night. Temperatures in rural spots down into single digits. A fresh but fine start then to Friday, and overall a pretty good looking day. Certainly, as I said, a lot drier than many days have been through this week. Still not completely dry, still a few showers perhaps across the far north of Scotland and the north and the west of Northern Ireland. A few showers feeding in from the Irish Sea into northwest England possibly too. But I think for most of England and Wales it'll be a dry, fine start to the day. As I said, a little bit cooler than it was first thing this morning. During the day we'll see some clouds developing, so it'll be a day of cloudy spells and a little bit of sunshine coming through. A few showers are still possible in western areas, but they should be light and most places won't see them stay dry. It will turn a bit cloudy over the Western Isles with some drizzly rain possible here as the breeze picks up. But for most, the winds are a lot lighter than they have been, so feeling a bit warmer than today. Temperatures high teens, low 20s. Warmer still on Saturday, and again, most places dry and bright. Still a possibility of a few showers in western Scotland. Quite a bit of cloud around on Saturday, so the sunshine will be fairly hazy, but I think you'll notice that difference, the humidity starting to pick up, and a warmer day with temperatures more widely over 20 degrees Celsius. Make the most of it though, because Sunday things turn wet and windy once more.
Today, clouds overhead. Total zen within. Box Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
It's our biggest Great British giveaway to date. You could be driving away with this brand new Benamar Primera motorhome. This 4-berth home from home comes complete with integrated kitchen and bathroom areas and has all of the tech you'd expect from the latest 2025 model. We'll also give you an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash to make sure that any adventures you take in your new motorhome are taken in style. For a chance to win, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB16 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 31st of October. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, this Trump made a good start. No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every